You're all set, Mr. Davidoff.
Okay, I know Mr. Winograd is trying to get in to the meeting right now. He just texted me. We'll just give him another minute and then we'll start.
Okay, I'm on. Sorry about that.
Good morning, Mr. Winograd. All right, so good morning, everyone. I'd like to call the May 18th meeting of the Community Planning and Economic Development Committee to order. For the record, let it reflect that Mr. Zanowitz, Mr. Winograd is present, according to his screen name. Mayor Cantor's here on phone. We also have our town engineer, Greg Summers, our economic development specialist, Kristen Gorski, our town planner, Mr. Dumay, and our acting town manager, Mr. Ledwith. I apologize for some of the technical difficulties people have had, either with Civic Clerk or accessing the town website. Hopefully we'll get that straightened out before somebody else's subcommittee meeting. But we're all here, so we're ready to proceed. The first item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes of the April 5th and April 20th meetings of this subcommittee. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Okay, moved by Mr. Sedanowitz, seconded by Mr. Winograd. If they're seeing no corrections, all those in favor of accepting them, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Okay, I'm doing this all from memory as to how the agenda appears. I think the next item is a discussion of the TOD ordinance. And I just want to say before I pass it over to Acting Town Manager Ledwith that this item will be on the next agenda of the Town Council at its regular meeting as a public hearing. And since it's subject to a public hearing, I think it would be best that we just listen to the presentation from the town planner so as not to prejudice any persons or anybody who wishes to give input with respect to this ordinance. It just wouldn't be fair, and it'd be just for informational purposes this evening. If you do have questions, the appropriate time to ask them would be after the presentation at the public hearing, when the council has the ability to raise questions and to comment. With that said, I'll turn it over to Mr. Ledwith.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Rick Ledwith, Acting Town Manager. As just outlined by the chairman, at the last town council meeting, the transit-oriented development ordinance was referred to Town Plan and Zoning in the Capital Region Council of Governments and set for a public hearing on June 14th at the next town or the town council meeting dated on June 14th. We've discussed this ordinance at several CPED meetings over the last several months and have incorporated your feedback into the final ordinance. And to this point, this is a significant piece of legislation our council will act on that will encourage and support residential and commercial development within close proximity of the Connecticut fast track stations in both Elmwood and at Flatbush Avenue, as well as the planned rail station. This ordinance will promote higher residential and employment densities that will support transit use, which are also goals outlined in our plan of conservation and development. Since this ordinance is set for the public hearing, we wanted our town planner to provide one last overview for CPED. But as the chair said, any questions that you may have should be held to the night of the hearing. And through you, Mr. Chairman, I will turn it over to Mr. Dumais, our town planner.
Thank you, Mr. Ledwith. One caveat to that, if any members of the council do have a question of a technical nature regarding the ordinance, it is permissible to share those or request those to be directed through staff. If you have technical concerns, that is always an option as you're a zoning authority, and staff can provide that offline. So as both the chairman and Mr. Ledwith had mentioned, this is a continuation of our discussion and work with the council on transit-oriented development. This ordinance is a more refined version of the concept that was brought back to CPED in a rough draft form back in January. And at its core, it also incorporated feedback from the additional outreach we received from the business communities, from property owners, and from developers. So the basic structure of the ordinance is really fourfold. One, to establish the transit-oriented district, there was a decision made that we first are going to define what the TOD is. Once we do that, we are going to propose a map amendment to actually map this new zone onto specific areas that correspond to all of our previous discussions, which are generally a quarter mile around each CT fast track station on land that is already zoned for commercial use. And then the next components of the ordinance are essentially the updating all of the tables. So the ordinance itself, the way that it intends to increase development density, both from an employment standpoint and a residential density, is to allow more permissive standards within the zone itself. So all development within the zone, virtually all development within the zone, would be as of right through site plan approval. Residential densities would be increased to one of our highest standards, the highest standard in the town, meaning that it would be permit the most units per acre in town. It would have significant reductions in required parking, both on-site and allow for off-site parking use as well, and have some very permissive and innovative standards regarding shared parking. So there's built-in mechanisms to permit shared parking methodologies to further reduce any parking standards, but still provide for adequate support of any potential development. There's also standards that we've included for bicycle parking requirements, which is something we've heard from our BBC and also the community at large, and also we know supports transit ridership. In addition, the construct of the ordinance also places an emphasis on form and design standards. So that's something somewhat unique to our zoning ordinances. We have some of those in our traditional neighborhood design district, but the intent of this section is to really create and support the creation of a neighborhood through design focus, building placement, building the buildings up to the street, creating a sense of street wall, creating a more walkable, pedestrian-friendly environment. So we want buildings to have windows and doors, and have those windows and doors activate and face the public streets and rights of way. We also are permitting higher building heights in this district as of right, 5 stories, 55 feet, with options, and we'll talk about some bonus standards in a moment, but with options to get even higher development densities. And then lastly, there's some other requirements for site access or curb cut management, whereby we want to limit the number of curb cuts into any one property to reduce the number of pedestrian vehicle conflicts and thus make the neighborhood more walkable. Also somewhat unique in our zoning standards are a proposed set of development bonus standards. So these standards were things we heard from both the community and the council as important to try to incentivize through the use of zoning to achieve certain important characteristics in the creation of complete neighborhoods. And the standards that were chosen for the ordinance include access management, again, so that's curb cuts, so we'll talk about that in a moment, affordable housing, infill development, public space, and sustainability. So there is a bonus standard or table that any property owner could use or seek points in to get above the baseline standards and the zoning and get increases in floor area ratios. So that's really the bulk or size mass of the building, increases in building coverage. Sorry, as the lawnmower goes by. And then also further reductions in on-site parking requirements. So the first bonus is that access management. So if a property has pre-existing multiple curb cuts, we're suggesting providing a bonus to reduce those curb cuts and eliminate them. Also, if there's an opportunity to have lots provide interconnectivity and share parking between lots without having additional curb cuts, we're suggesting bonusing that. A standard regarding the provision for affordable housing. So there are various points attributed for a certain total percentage of units within a development that meets the state statutory definition of what is an affordable housing set aside or a deed restricted unit. And those standards relate, there's two different categories. One is for units that are at 80% area median income with two different bonus provisions, one for 15% of the total units and one for 25. And then again, there is another bonus provision for units if they were to be provided at 60% of area median income. And those are at 10 and 15%. There's another provision regarding infill development. So this provision and the next is similar to the provisions that we have in our business center district, the BC zone, that was a result of outreach efforts a number of years ago with the community to try to incentivize redevelopment within the center. And these include filling in areas of parking lots or other undeveloped areas along street frontage or street facing areas of properties. So if someone's going to build a new building in those areas of a property, the bonus in this instance would be that any ground floor would be exempt from floor area ratios, coverage, or parking calculations. So that would be a significant potential bonus. A public space bonus would be anyone looking, we're trying to incentivize the creation of publicly accessible but privately owned and maintained private space, public space. So these are parklets, and there's a provision here with some calculations about how many points you get for the provision of public open space. And then lastly, there is a sustainability bonus that we're trying to incentivize the development of green roofs, which has climate benefits, but also stormwater quality benefits. And then the development utilizing any renewable energy systems. So there are bonus points available for geothermal and or solar photovoltaic systems to be included. And then the last sections of the ordinance are updates to the schedule of permitted uses, the schedule of bulk standards. So it's really the numbers involved with controlling setbacks, building height, coverage, and then the maps themselves. So with that, that's kind of my brief overview of the construct of the ordinance and what went into it. And like I said, happy to answer any technical questions that any members of the council might have. You can email those through Rick or give Rick a call, and I'm happy to have any follow-ups as needed.
Thank you, Mr. Dumais. I do have a technical question, and I don't know if it's appropriate here or just give you a heads up. You don't have to answer it this morning, but we currently have a TND zone overlay, and can you explain to the members the impact that the current TND zone would have with respect to this ordinance? So if it's appropriate to answer this morning, fine. If not, I can wait till next week.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think it's appropriate to answer now. I'm going to try to share a screen real. Cannot do that. Okay. So the zoning maps themselves. So if we look at the Elmwood Station area, roughly the northwest quadrant of that area, so the intersection of New Park Avenue and New Britain Avenue, the traditional neighborhood design district extends down to New Park Avenue along New Britain Avenue. So there's an overlay zone that goes all the way down to that station area. This ordinance is, since we're proposing a rezone, we're proposing that the underlying zone for the impacted properties that meet the definition of the ordinance be rezoned to the TOD. But in addition, and importantly, to actually cut the TND out of this station area and just have the TOD apply and guide future development or redevelopment of those parcels. That's important because there could be some conflicts between the TOD and the TND. So we thought it important to cut back the TND in that area and only utilize the TOD. And largely they have the same goal in mind to create more walkable traditional development typologies, but it just gets complicated when you layer on another overlay zone. So the ordinance before the council is to rezone those properties, and that would include the elimination of the portions of the TND that also overlap any properties in this area.
Thank you, Mr. Dumais. That was exactly how I thought it was going to work. But it didn't. So just for clarification, where the TOD ordinance doesn't apply, the TND overlay would still remain in effect until further council action, correct?
That is correct, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Does anyone else have any questions of a technical nature? Thank you, Mr. Dumais, for an amazing summarization of a very extensive ordinance that took quite a period of time to do. But I think it's important for the committee to note that there was extensive community outreach. I do believe there was some surveys done. There was a lot of outreach to the business community, to the current owners of parcels there. So everything with respect to the process, shouldn't come as a huge surprise to anybody. I think that's important to note. This is something that we started very early last council term. So sometimes change takes a while, but I would ask that all the members, read the ordinance very carefully. So we're quite familiar with it for the public hearing. And Mr. Manager, if you could send that out to the council as a whole to ask people to, read this to get a full understanding of the impacts here, because this is a significant change from what we're used to in this particular area, without creating any type of judgment as to whether or not people support it or don't support it. But I do think it's significant enough that people should be well versed in this, and to know that if they do have questions of a technical nature, the time to ask is between now and next Tuesday. And it would be very difficult at the council table to make what would be known as significant changes to this ordinance. So that's it. Does anyone else have anything further to add? Okay. Seeing or hearing none, thank you very much. So if I recall the agenda, I think the next item, Mr. Manager, goes to reports of different departments. And I think the first one that would report would be the community development.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and your recollection of the agenda is outstanding. So yes, we will move to the Community Development Department update, which was uploaded onto Civic Clerk. And we've invited our town engineer, Greg Summer, to join us this morning. And what Greg will do is just hit a couple of the highlights of the report on some projects that are going on around town. And then we would turn it back to the committee for any questions on those projects or anything of a substantial nature that's found in the report itself. And then that would conclude our meeting this morning. So we'd like to get you out hopefully by 8:30 or so, since this committee itself has been meeting quite often over the last 6 or 8 weeks on several ordinances. So thank you. Through you, Mr. Chairman, I'll turn it over to Mr. Summer.
Thank you, Mr. Manager, and good morning, everybody. Greg Summer, Town Engineer. Just touching on a couple projects we have going on. Our Trumper Trail is progressing nicely. Phase 5, that's the piece from Farmington Avenue to Fern Street, is nearing completion. I walked it yesterday. It looked really nice. Getting a lot of good feedback from the public on that. Just some landscaping and some topsoil and seeding. Pretty much we'll wrap that up. So Phase 6 is the next piece. That's going from Fern Street, continuing north to Duffield Drive. We are currently in the process of finalizing our bid documents, hoping to have that out probably within the next month or so, and then most likely starting construction later this fall. So that'll be nice to transition and keep that momentum moving in the right direction with the trail construction. Braeburn Road Culvert. This project obviously has been frustrating for everybody. It's been going on for quite a while now. We've made some recent progress with some construction change orders that were finally, advanced. They had some new test plates that they were trying out to line that culvert with. So those went pretty successfully, and are in the process of advancing that and getting additional materials so that project can continue. Hoping to wrap that up this season. Fern Street Bridge, as you probably are aware, we had to deploy some barriers over the southern portion of the bridge to direct traffic away from the most deteriorated sections. That'll remain in place until construction of that bridge starts, which we're expecting to be later this fall. We're just waiting on a few final easements and a permit from the Army Corps that will allow us to proceed with advertising that project for construction. New Park Avenue Complete Streets project. Our design is about 35% complete. Working on reviewing comments that we've received from CROG. And then Assistant Town Engineer Jim Brennan, along with Ms. Gorski, have already started some of the outreach meeting with businesses to get their input on the project. And we also are planning to present to the Pedestrian Bicycle Commission at their June meeting, give them a little introduction to the project and certainly listen to their input. And then lastly, our paving first round is underway. This morning we're paving Farmington Avenue. We'll probably be out there for the better remainder of this week, and then shifting down to Mayflower to continuing there. And then we have three other streets: Drury, Penn Drive, and Griswold Drive, all on the list. Farmington Avenue and Mayflower are both getting bicycle facilities. We had a little bit of back and forth between the PVC and some residents to finalize the plan, but I think we came up with a good compromise that adds bike lanes on Farmington Avenue along with maintaining the on-street parking, and similarly on Mayflower Street, we'll maintain the one lane of parking and then add bike lanes in the northbound direction. So that pavement marking, those will obviously follow probably later this month, early June, after the paving is complete. That's all I have. So if there's any questions, happy to answer those.
Thank you, Mr. Summers. I first want to congratulate you on your promotion to town engineer. And secondly, I'd like to also thank you for listening to the residents on Farmington Avenue who were quite concerned about the changes that were going to take place on the streetscape in front of their homes. They were quite vocal, some of them having reached out to several of us, as well as taking to local media sources. So I think your ability to listen and to digest what they were saying and create a positive a relationship with them bodes very well. So thank you for meeting the challenge head on. And certain this won't be the only challenge you'll encounter during your tenure, but I think the way that you handled it was quite professional, and it's worthy of noting this morning. So thank you. Thank you also for presenting your report. Does anyone have any questions of Mr. Summers? Seeing none. I'd also like to thank Ms. Gorski for being here this morning and listening in. I'm certain next month's agenda will have economic development update. I'm certain there will be significant things to report with respect to how the dining situation is going, and as people start to come out of the COVID period that was very detrimental to our business community. You'll be able to share with us that, as well as I'm certain at that point we'll have more information on the ability to use ARPA funding for small business grants to nonprofits and small businesses. With that said, if there's nothing further, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Moved.
Moved by Mr. Zanowitz, thanks, seconded by Mr. Winograd. Everyone have a wonderful Wednesday. Thank you. We stand adjourned.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye, everyone.